8:30 on a Thursday evening. A quiet diner on the edge of town, rain tapping against the windows. 3 men in tailored suits surrounded a woman's booth, one flashing metal beneath his jacket, while the waitress vanished, and every other customer suddenly found their coffee fascinating. In the corner booth, Hunter Blake sat with his 8-year-old daughter Harper, coloring crayons scattered between them. His hands were calloused from 3 jobs, his face weathered beyond his 38 years, his shoulders bent like someone life had already broken. He looked like nobody. He looked like nothing, just another single dad drowning in bills and exhaustion. But when Hunter slowly set down his coffee cup and stood, something shifted in the air. Something that made all 3 men turn. Something that made them hesitate for the first time that night. Wrong table, wrong day. Gentlemen. The words came out quiet, almost gentle. They had no idea who was walking toward them, and by the time they understood, everything would already be different. The fluorescent lights of Rosie's diner buzzed their tired evening song, casting pale yellow shadows over cracked vinyl booths and faded linoleum floors. Hunter Blake pressed his back against the corner seat, an old habit he could never shake, his eyes sweeping the room once before settling on his daughter's artwork. The eviction notice in his jacket pocket crinkled every time he breathed, a paper ghost reminding him that 72 hours stood between his family and the street. $1,800. Might as well have been 18 million. He had worked 16 hours yesterday, 12 today, and tomorrow promised more of the same endless grind that left his bones aching and his soul hollow. Harper hummed softly as she colored, her small tongue poking out in concentration the way her mother used to do. The thought of Rebecca sent a familiar ache through Hunter's chest, the kind that never quite faded, no matter how many years passed. 3 years since the accident, 3 years of learning how to braid hair from YouTube videos, of burning pancakes on Saturday mornings, of lying awake at night wondering if he was enough. He watched his daughter now, her innocence untouched by the weight he carried, and something in him cracked just a little more. Her sneakers had a hole near the left toe. She thought he did not notice. He noticed everything about her. Cataloged every need he could not meet, every promise he could not keep. "Daddy, do you think dragons eat hamburgers?" Harper held up her coloring book, revealing a purple dragon she had been working on for the past hour. Her eyes sparkled with that pure childhood wonder that made Hunter forget, just for a moment, how tired he was. He leaned forward, studying the drawing with exaggerated seriousness, playing the game they always played. She had given the dragon kind eyes and a crooked smile, nothing like the monsters in fairy tales, just like her to find the softness in everything. "I think dragons eat whatever they want," Hunter said, managing a smile that felt like lifting concrete. "But this one looks like he prefers chocolate cake." Harper giggled, the sound cutting through the diner's gloom like sunlight through storm clouds. He lived for that laugh, worked 3 jobs for that laugh, would walk through fire for that laugh. She was the only reason he had stopped drinking 18 months ago, flushed the pills the VA kept prescribing, clawed his way back from the edge of an abyss that had swallowed too many of his brothers. The nightmares still came, of course. They always would. Afghanistan lived in his bones now, embedded like shrapnel that no surgeon could remove. Some nights he woke, gasping, tasting dust and cordite, hearing the screams of men he could not save. Staff Sergeant Hunter Blake, 82nd Airborne, had brought every single soldier in his squad home alive through 4 deployments, but the ones from other units, the ones he had watched, die in the chaos of ambush and IED. Their faces visited him in the dark hours. He had learned to live with those ghosts, had learned to function despite them, but he had never learned to silence them. Hunter glanced around the diner, taking inventory without conscious thought. 6 other customers scattered across the booths, an elderly couple sharing pie near the window, 2 truckers at the counter arguing about football, a young woman 3 booths down, laptop open, Papers spread across her table like fallen leaves. She had been typing furiously since Hunter arrived, occasionally pushing her glasses up her nose with the kind of nervous energy that spoke of deadlines and desperation. Pretty, in a sharp-edged professional way. Dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, the kind of woman who looked like she had not slept properly in days, but refused to stop moving. The bell above the door chimed, and Hunter's attention snapped to the entrance. Old instincts never died, only waited for moments like these to prove their worth. 3 men walked in, shaking rain from expensive overcoats, their shoes gleaming beneath the harsh lights. Everything about them screamed money and power, the kind of confidence that came from never hearing the word no. They moved with coordinated purpose, their eyes scanning the diner until they locked onto a target. Hunter's spine straightened imperceptibly. Wrong energy, wrong place. These were not truckers or travelers or the usual collection of lost souls who washed up at Rosie's on rainy Thursday nights. The 3 men slid into the booth across from the young woman without invitation, positioning themselves to block any escape. The largest one, 6'4", and built like a linebacker, placed his bulk between her and the aisle. The other 2 flanked him, creating a wall of tailored fabric and barely concealed menace. Hunter watched through lowered eyes, his coffee mug positioned just so, every muscle in his body slowly coiling. Harper continued coloring, oblivious to the shift in atmosphere, and he was grateful for that. She had seen enough ugliness in her short life. He would shield her from this one, too, whatever it took. "Miss Rivers." The man in the center spoke with the kind of voice that expected immediate compliance. He had silver hair, manicured hands, and the cold eyes of someone who had ordered terrible things and slept soundly afterward. "We need to have a conversation about your recent investigative activities." The woman, Rivers, did not flinch. Hunter noted that with respect. Most people crumbled under that kind of pressure, wilted beneath the weight of implied violence. She stared back at the silver-haired man with something close to defiance, her jaw set, her hands flat on the table to hide their trembling. "I'm working," she said. "Make an appointment with my editor." "I'm afraid this cannot wait." Silverhair smiled without warmth, the expression never reaching his eyes. He reached into his coat, and Hunter's hand tightened on his coffee mug, but the man only produced a phone. He placed it on the table between them, the screen glowing with what looked like photographs. "Do you recognize these names? Robert Finch, Patricia Holloway, Dennis Kowalski, all sources for your little story about the Veterans Recovery Foundation." Hunter's ears pricked at the name. Every veteran in the state knew that foundation. The one that promised help and delivered paperwork and rejection letters. Rivers' face went pale for just a second, a crack in her armor that the 3 men clearly noticed and enjoyed. Then the steel returned, harder than before. "I do not discuss my sources with anyone. You do not have to." Silverhair's smile widened, predatory now, a shark scenting blood in the water. "Robert Finch was found in his garage last Tuesday. Carbon monoxide poisoning. Very tragic." Patricia Holloway decided to take an extended vacation, destination unknown. And Dennis Kowalski received a very generous donation to his daughter's college fund, enough to convince him that some stories simply are not worth telling. He leaned forward, invading her space, his voice dropping to something barely above a whisper. "The foundation has many friends, Miss Rivers. Friends in law enforcement, friends in the judiciary, friends who reward loyalty and punish betrayal with equal enthusiasm." The waitress had vanished into the kitchen. The elderly couple studied their pie with intense concentration. The truckers at the counter had gone silent, their argument forgotten, their eyes fixed on anything but the unfolding confrontation. Hunter recognized the behavior, the universal human instinct to become invisible when predators entered the room. He had seen it in villages across Afghanistan, in the faces of people who had learned that attention meant death. He understood it. He did not judge it. But something in him, something he had tried so hard to bury, refused to accept it. Harper tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, those men are being mean to that lady." Her voice was small but certain. The moral clarity of childhood cutting through adult complications. She had always been like that, his daughter, able to see right and wrong with a simplicity he had lost somewhere in the mountains of Kandahar. He looked at her face, at the concern creasing her small features, and felt something shift inside his chest. She was watching him now, waiting to see what he would do, what kind of man her father really was. Hunter thought about everything he had to lose. The apartment they were already being evicted from, the fragile stability he had rebuilt from the rubble of his life, the custody arrangement that hung by threads, his ex-wife's parents always circling, always watching, waiting for him to prove he was unfit. He thought about the smart choice, the safe choice, the choice that any reasonable person in his position would make. Stay seated, stay quiet, stay invisible. Let whatever was happening 3 booths down remain someone else's problem. Then he thought about the men who had died, while he could do nothing but watch. About the guilt that had nearly drowned him. About the man he used to be. The one who never left anyone behind. The one who had earned the respect of soldiers through action rather than words. He thought about what Harper would remember from this night, what lesson she would carry forward into her own life. Whether her father was the kind of man who looked away, or the kind who stood up. "Stay here, sweetheart." Hunter set down his coffee mug, his movements slow and deliberate. "Daddy needs to have a word with those gentlemen." "Are you going to help her?" Hunter looked at his daughter, at the hope in her eyes, at the faith she placed in him despite everything. "Yeah, baby. I am going to try." He stood up from the booth, his joints protesting after another endless day of physical labor. His clothes were worn and stained with honest work. His boots were scuffed. His face carried lines that belonged to a much older man. He looked exactly like what they would expect him to be. Another nobody, another bystander, another piece of furniture in a forgotten diner on a rainy Thursday night. He shuffled toward the confrontation, keeping his shoulders slumped, his gait tired, everything about his body language projecting defeat and harmlessness. The 3 men did not even glance his way as he approached. Why would they? He was invisible, just another broken-down working stiff who knew his place in the world. Hunter stopped at their booth, close enough now to see the fear Rivers was fighting to hide, close enough to smell the expensive cologne and the cheaper menace beneath it. The large man had his hand clamped around her wrist, his grip tight enough to leave bruises. A gun bulged beneath his jacket, poorly concealed, meant to intimidate rather than hide. "Excuse me," Hunter said. His voice came out soft, almost apologetic, the voice of a man who expected to be dismissed. Silverhair's head turned, irritation flickering across his patrician features. "Walk away, friend. This does not concern you." "Actually, it does." Hunter kept his tone mild, conversational, like they were discussing the weather rather than the woman's visible terror. "See, I was trying to enjoy a quiet dinner with my daughter, and you gentlemen are making a lot of noise. Scaring the other customers." He paused, tilting his head slightly. "Showing firearms in a public establishment. That is a felony in this state, in case you were wondering." The large man released Rivers' wrist and stood, unfolding himself to his full height, towering over Hunter by a good 4 inches and outweighing him by at least 60 pounds. "I said walk away." His voice rumbled like distant thunder, thick with the promise of violence. Hunter did not move, did not step back, did not break eye contact. Something shifted in the air between them, a change in pressure that made the other 2 men straighten in their seats. Rivers noticed it too, her eyes widening slightly, seeing something in Hunter's stillness that contradicted everything his appearance suggested. The diner seemed to hold its breath, waiting. "I'm going to give you one chance," Hunter said, his voice still soft, almost gentle, the way a parent might speak to a misbehaving child. Pay your bill. Walk out that door. Never bother this woman again. He tilted his head the other way, a slight movement that somehow conveyed absolute certainty. Take the chance, because if you do not, he smiled then. And it was not the tired smile he gave his daughter, not the beaten-down expression of a single father drowning in debt. It was something else entirely, something forged in the crucible of combat, tempered by experiences these men could not begin to imagine. Something that made the large man hesitate, just for a second, doubt flickering across his brutish features. Wrong table. Hunter's smile did not waver. Wrong day. Gentlemen. Silverhair laughed, a short bark of genuine amusement that echoed off the diner's walls. Do you have any idea who you are talking to? Any idea what we are capable of? He gestured at Hunter's worn clothes, his calloused hands, his general air of poverty and exhaustion. You look like you cannot afford your own dinner, let alone a hospital bill. Walk away while you still can. I have been to plenty of hospitals, Hunter said. They are not as scary as you think. He had not moved, had not shifted his weight, had not done anything that could be construed as threatening. But something in his stillness made all three men uneasy now. Some predatory instinct warning them that the math of this situation wasn't as simple as it appeared. The woman stays. You leave. That is the only way this ends without someone getting hurt. The large man moved first, as Hunter knew he would. Men like that always did, so confident in their size and strength that they never learned to read the signs of real danger. He threw a haymaker, a powerful but telegraphed punch aimed at Hunter's jaw, the kind of blow that ended bar fights before they started. Hunter was not there when it arrived. He shifted 6 inches to the left, a movement so economical it barely registered as motion, and the fist whistled past his ear. Before the large man could recover, Hunter's hand shot out and seized his wrist, twisting it at an angle that sent lightning bolts of pain up the man's arm. A half-second later, the man was on his knees, gasping, his shoulder joint screaming at the edge of dislocation. Staff Sergeant Hunter Blake, Hunter said, his voice still calm, still quiet, as if he were introducing himself at a church social. 82nd Airborne Division. 4 deployments. I have taken fire in more countries than you have visited on vacation. He applied a fraction more pressure to the wrist, and the large man whimpered. I brought every soldier in my squad home alive, every single one. You want to know how I managed that? The other 2 men had risen from the booth, hands moving toward their jackets, toward the weapons Hunter knew they carried. He shifted his grip on the large man's arm, using his body as a shield, positioning himself so that any shot would have to go through their own man first. Military thinking, tactical geometry, the kind of instincts that years of combat had burned into his nervous system. I managed it by being very, very good at identifying threats, Hunter continued, and by eliminating those threats before they could hurt my people. His eyes swept across the 2 standing men, cataloging their positions, their likely weapons, their probable skill levels. Hired muscle. Dangerous to civilians, but nothing he had not handled before. Right now, I count 3 threats in this diner. 1 is already neutralized. The other 2 are deciding whether they want to join him on the floor. Rivers had not moved from her seat, her laptop still open, her phone lying face down on the table where it had fallen. But Hunter caught the slight movement of her hand, the subtle repositioning that told him she was recording everything. Smart woman. Brave woman. The kind who chased dangerous stories despite the cost, who refused to be silenced by men in expensive suits. You are making a very big mistake. Silverhair's voice had lost some of its smoothness, an edge of uncertainty creeping in. Do you know who I am? Do you know what the Foundation can do to people like you? I know exactly what the Foundation does. Hunter's grip tightened, and the large man groaned. I applied for help twice after I came home. Got denied twice. Meanwhile, your executives drive luxury cars and live in gated communities. I have seen the financial reports, the ones your people tried to bury. $73 million donated to help veterans. Less than 12% actually reached anyone who needed it. He smiled again, that cold expression that had nothing to do with humor. The rest went to administrative costs, which is a fancy way of saying it went into pockets like yours. Something flickered in Silverhair's eyes. Recognition. Recalculation. You have been following the story. I have been living the story. Hunter released the large man's wrist, shoving him forward so he sprawled on the floor between the booths. Every veteran who could not pay their rent because the help never came. Every family that fell apart because Daddy came home broken and nobody cared enough to fix him. Every soldier who ate a bullet because the system that sent him to war abandoned him when he came back. His voice had changed now, harder, carrying the weight of all those names, all those faces, all those brothers and sisters lost to indifference. I know their names. Do you want me to start listing them? The diner had gone completely silent. Even the rain against the windows seemed to have paused, holding its breath along with everyone else. The elderly couple had stopped pretending not to watch. The truckers at the counter had turned on their stools, their eyes fixed on the confrontation. Rivers sat frozen, her phone still recording, her expression caught somewhere between fear and something that looked almost like hope. Robert Finch served 3 tours in Iraq, Hunter said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Bronze Star, Purple Heart. Came home with a traumatic brain injury that made it impossible to hold down a job. Applied to your foundation 4 times. Denied 4 times. Found dead in his garage 3 weeks ago, and you have the nerve to call it a tragic accident. He took a step towards Silverhair, and for the first time, the man actually retreated. Backing against the booth. Patricia Holloway was a nurse at the VA hospital who started asking questions about where the money went. Now she has disappeared. Dennis Kowalski lost his son in Afghanistan and started a support group for Gold Star families. He was going to testify. Now his daughter suddenly has a full scholarship to a school she never applied to. How do you know all this? Silverhair's composure was cracking now, real fear seeping through the gaps. Who are you working with? I'm not working with anyone. Hunter stopped advancing, standing in the middle of the diner, like a monument to something the 3 men could not quite understand. I'm just a father trying to buy his daughter dinner, a veteran trying to survive in a country that forgot about him the moment he became inconvenient. A man who has spent the last 3 years pretending to be invisible because that was the only way to keep going. He glanced back at Harper, still sitting in the corner booth, watching her father with wide eyes. But some things you cannot look away from. Some moments, you have to choose what kind of man you are going to be. The second suited man, the one who had been reaching for his weapon, suddenly drew his pistol. The movement was fast, practiced, the motion of someone who had done this before. But Hunter was faster. He closed the distance in 2 steps, his hand clamping around the gun before it could fully clear the holster, twisting it away with a technique he had practiced 10,000 times until it became as natural as breathing. The gun clattered to the floor, and Hunter's elbow connected with the man's solar plexus, folding him in half, a knee to the face as he doubled over, and the second threat was down, blood streaming from a broken nose. Silverhair scrambled backward, pulling his own weapon, a compact 9mm that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. His hand was shaking, the gun wavering between Hunter and the door, his sophisticated facade completely shattered. Stay back. I will shoot. I swear to God, I will shoot. Hunter did not stop moving, did not slow down, did not show any sign that the weapon concerned him at all. You have never killed anyone, he said, his voice almost conversational. I can tell by the way you hold that gun, the way your finger is already on the trigger instead of alongside the frame, the way you are pointing it at my chest instead of center mass." He was close now. Close enough to see the sweat beading on Silverhair's forehead, close enough to smell his fear. "I have killed people, more than I can count, more than I can forget. You do not want to know what that does to a man." I said, "Stay back. Here's what is going to happen." Hunter's hand shot out faster than thought, and suddenly he was holding the gun, the weapon stripped from Silverhair's grip so quickly, the man did not even register the loss until it was over. "You are going to sit down. You are going to answer every question this journalist asks, and then you are going to wait for the police to arrive and explain why you threatened a woman with deadly weapons in a public establishment." He ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, and set the disassembled weapon on the table. "Or you can try to run, and I will stop you. Your choice." The large man had struggled to his feet, cradling his injured arm, his face twisted with pain and humiliation. The second man remained on the floor, groaning through his broken nose, blood pooling beneath him. Silverhair stood frozen, his expensive suit rumpled, his careful composure utterly destroyed, staring at Hunter like he was seeing a ghost. "Who are you?" The question came out as a whisper, stripped of all authority. Hunter picked up one of the fallen phones, checking to make sure the recording was still running, then handed it to Rivers. "Nobody special, just a father having dinner with his daughter." He glanced back at Harper again, offering her a small smile, the gentle expression he reserved only for her. She smiled back, uncertain but trusting, and something in Hunter's chest loosened just a fraction. "A father who got tired of watching good people get hurt by men who think money makes them untouchable." Rivers found her voice, stronger now, the journalist in her rising to meet the moment. "I need you to state your name for the record, all three of you, and your connection to the Veterans Recovery Foundation." Silverhair's mouth opened, closed, opened again. The fight had gone out of him entirely, replaced by the dawning realization of how thoroughly he had miscalculated this evening. He looked at Hunter, at the calm certainty in those weathered eyes, and whatever resistance remained crumbled to dust. "My name is Franklin Garrett. I am the Chief Operating Officer of the Veterans Recovery Foundation." The words came out flat, defeated, the confession of a man who understood that his world had just ended. "These men work for a private security firm contracted by the Foundation. We were sent to convince Miss Rivers to abandon her investigation." "Convince?" Rivers practically spat the word. "Is that what you call threatening to make people disappear?" Garrett said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Hunter moved back to his booth, settling into the seat across from Harper, his body finally allowing itself to feel the exhaustion it had been holding at bay. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up his cold coffee, the adrenaline beginning to fade, leaving behind the familiar emptiness that always followed violence. Harper watched him with those knowing eyes, seeing more than any 8-year-old should, understanding on some instinctive level what her father had just done and what it had cost him. "Are you okay, Daddy?" Hunter reached across the table and squeezed her small hand. "I am now. Sweetheart, I am now." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Someone had called the police, probably one of the truckers, finally finding their courage now that the danger had passed. Rivers was already on her phone, calling her editor, her voice rapid and excited as she described what had just happened. The story had changed now, grown bigger than corporate fraud and missing money. It had become something else entirely. A veteran standing up, a father protecting a stranger, a broken man finding his purpose in the most unlikely of places. The rain continued to tap against the windows, gentler now, as if the storm itself was winding down. Hunter watched the three men sitting in their booth, deflated and defeated. waiting for the consequences they had spent years believing would never come. He thought about all the veterans those consequences would help, all the families who might finally see justice, all the brothers and sisters who had been abandoned by the system these men had corrupted. It was not redemption, not really. Nothing could bring back the ones who had been lost. But it was something, a step in the right direction, a reminder that even broken things could still serve a purpose. Harper had returned to her coloring, her purple dragon now sporting wings and a tiny crown. She hummed softly as she worked, the same tune her mother used to sing, and Hunter felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He had spent 3 years trying to be invisible, trying to protect his daughter by becoming nobody, by burying the soldier so deep that he thought he would never surface again. But some things could not stay buried. Some men were not meant to be invisible. The police cruisers pulled into the parking lot, their lights painting the diner windows in alternating red and blue. Hunter watched them come, feeling something he had not felt in years. Not happiness exactly, not peace, but something close to hope. The sense that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind him. That the skills he had tried so hard to forget might be worth something after all. That the man he used to be and the father he had become were not as incompatible as he had feared. "Daddy?" Harper looked up from her coloring, crayon poised in midair. "Are you a superhero?" Hunter laughed, the sound rusty from disuse but genuine. "No, baby. Just a soldier. Just your dad." "I think you are a superhero." She said it with absolute certainty, the way children stated facts about the sky being blue or grass being green. "Superheroes help people who are scared. That is what you did." He did not know how to respond to that, so he simply reached across and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture reminded him of Rebecca, of all the small moments they had shared before the accident, before everything fell apart. He missed her still, would always miss her, but for the first time in 3 years, the missing did not feel like drowning. It felt like remembering, like honoring, like carrying her forward into whatever came next. The police officers entered the diner, hands on their weapons, eyes scanning for threats. Hunter raised his hand slowly, making himself visible, making sure they understood he was not a danger. Rivers immediately began explaining, her journalist training taking over, laying out the situation with clarity and precision. She pointed at Garrett and his men, described the threats, referenced the recording on her phone. The officers listened, their expressions shifting from suspicion to understanding to something that looked almost like respect when they glanced at Hunter. One of them, a sergeant with gray at his temples and the bearing of a fellow veteran, approached Hunter's booth. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with us, just to give a statement. Standard procedure." "I understand." Hunter looked at Harper, at the worry creeping back into her eyes. "Can my daughter wait with someone? The waitress, maybe? I do not want her sitting in a police station." The sergeant nodded, something softening in his face. "We will take care of her. You have my word." Rivers appeared at his elbow, her phone still clutched in her hand, her expression a complicated mixture of gratitude and professional curiosity. "I do not know how to thank you. What you did, standing up like that, it could not have been easy." "It was the easiest thing I have done in years." Hunter stood, wincing as his body reminded him that he was not as young as he used to be, not as resilient as the soldier he had once been. "Just make sure the story gets told. Make sure people know what these men did. That is all the thanks I need." "Staff Sergeant Blake." She said his rank and name with a respect he had not heard in a long time, the kind of respect he had stopped expecting from civilians. "I will make sure everyone knows. I promise you that." Hunter nodded, then turned to his daughter one last time. "I have to go talk to the police for a little while, sweetheart, but I will be back before you know it. You be good for the nice officers, okay?" Harper launched herself out of the booth and wrapped her arms around his waist, squeezing with all the strength in her small body. "I love you, Daddy. I am proud of you." The words hit him harder than any punch, any bullet, any explosion he had ever survived. He knelt down, pulling her close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the crayons she had been using. "I love you too, baby. More than anything in the whole world." More than purple dragons? He laughed again, wet this time, tears finally escaping down his weathered cheeks. "More than all the purple dragons in the universe." The police station smelled like stale coffee and bureaucracy, familiar scents that Hunter associated with the worst nights of his life. He sat in an interview room, his hands wrapped around a foam cup, waiting for the detective who would take his statement. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsher than the ones at Rosie's, illuminating every line on his face, every shadow under his eyes. He looked exactly like what he was, a tired man at the end of a very long day. But something had changed inside him. Some weight had shifted, and for the first time in years, he did not feel like he was drowning. The door opened and a woman walked in. Late 40s, sharp eyes, a no-nonsense bearing that reminded Hunter of his commanding officers. She carried a folder thick with papers and a recorder that she placed on the table between them. "Mr. Blake, I am Detective Christine Walsh. I have been assigned to investigate tonight's incident." She sat down across from him, studying his face with the practiced assessment of someone who had seen every kind of criminal and every kind of victim. "Before we begin, I want you to know that Miss Rivers has already given her statement. She speaks very highly of you." "She's a brave woman." Hunter took a sip of his coffee, grimacing at the taste. "Braver than me, probably, going after people like that, knowing what they could do to her." Walsh opened her folder, scanning the contents. "According to her statement, you single-handedly disarmed 3 men, at least 2 of whom were carrying firearms. You identified yourself as a staff sergeant in the 82nd Airborne." She looked up, her expression unreadable. "Is that accurate?" "Yes, ma'am. 4 deployments, multiple commendations, the kind of service record that makes most veterans look like weekend warriors." Walsh leaned back in her chair, reassessing him. "And now you work 3 jobs and live in a 1-bedroom apartment with your daughter. The system failed you, Mr. Blake." "The system fails a lot of people." Hunter set down his cup, meeting her eyes directly. "I'm not looking for sympathy, Detective. I did what I did because it was right, not because I wanted anything in return." Walsh was quiet for a moment, something shifting behind her professional facade. "My brother served in Afghanistan, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. Came home with PTSD so bad he could not hold down a job, could not maintain relationships, could not do anything except sit in his apartment and drink himself to death." She paused, her voice catching slightly. "He applied to the Veterans Recovery Foundation 3 times. They denied him 3 times. He killed himself 2 years ago." Hunter felt the words like a blow to the chest. Another name, another face, another brother lost to a war that followed them home, and a country that did not know how to help them fight it. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Do not be sorry." Walsh's voice hardened, professional armor sliding back into place. "Be the man who helps bring these bastards down. Miss Rivers has evidence of systematic fraud, embezzlement, and what appears to be witness intimidation going back at least 7 years. Your testimony, combined with her recordings and documentation, could be enough to launch a federal investigation. Whatever you need." Hunter leaned forward, something igniting in his chest that he had thought was long dead. "Names, dates, anything I know about veterans who were denied assistance. I have been keeping track, Detective. For years, I have been keeping track. Because I knew, someday, someone would finally start asking the right questions." The interview lasted 3 hours. Hunter talked until his voice grew hoarse, laying out everything he had observed, everything he had documented, every veteran he had known personally, who had been abandoned by the foundation that was supposed to help them. Walsh recorded it all, occasionally stopping to ask clarifying questions, her expression growing grimmer with each new revelation. By the time they finished, the folder on the table had grown considerably thicker, and the first hints of dawn were lightening the sky outside the window. "This is going to be big." Walsh closed her recorder, exhaustion and satisfaction mingling in her voice. Federal prosecutors, congressional hearings, the whole 9 yards. Franklin Garrett and his people are going to spend the rest of their lives in prison if even half of what you have told me is true. It is all true. Hunter stood, his body aching, his mind finally beginning to slow down. Every word of it. Walsh stood too, extending her hand across the table. "Thank you, Mr. Blake, for what you did tonight, and for everything you did before that. Your country may have forgotten you, but there are still people who remember what service means." He shook her hand, feeling the strength in her grip, the sincerity in her words. "Just make sure the story gets told, Detective. That is all I ask." Harper was asleep on a couch in the station lobby when Hunter emerged, her coloring book clutched to her chest, her face peaceful in a way that made him want to weep. The female officer who had been watching her looked up with a smile, gesturing for him to approach quietly. She held out as long as she could, the officer whispered, kept asking when her daddy would be done. Finally crashed about an hour ago. Hunter knelt beside the couch, brushing hair from his daughter's forehead, with fingers that trembled slightly. She stirred at his touch, her eyes fluttering open, confusion giving way to recognition, giving way to joy. "Daddy." "Hey, sweetheart." He gathered her into his arms, lifting her off the couch, feeling her warmth against his chest. "Ready to go home? Is the bad man going to jail?" Hunter thought about Franklin Garrett, about the fear in his eyes when he finally understood what he was facing, about all the other men like him, comfortable in their corruption, convinced of their untouchability. "Yes, baby. The bad men are going to jail." Harper nestled her head against his shoulder, already drifting back toward sleep. "Good. They were mean. Mean people should go to jail." He carried her out of the station and into the gray morning light, rain still falling in a soft mist that clung to everything like tears. His truck was parked at the diner, which meant walking, but he did not mind. The air felt clean after the stuffiness of the interview room, and Harper's weight in his arms felt like purpose, like meaning, like everything he had been searching for since the day he came home from the war. The diner was still there when they arrived, yellow crime scene tape stretched across the entrance, Rosie's neon sign dark and cold. Hunter's truck sat alone in the parking lot, rain speckled but otherwise untouched. He settled Harper into her car seat, tucking the coloring book beside her, making sure her seatbelt was secure. She was fully asleep now, her breathing deep and even, her small hand still clutching the purple crayon she had been using. He stood there for a long moment, watching his daughter sleep, feeling the rain soak through his jacket. 3 years ago, he had been ready to give up, ready to join the statistics, another veteran lost to the invisible wounds of war. But Harper had saved him without even knowing it, had given him a reason to keep fighting when everything else had failed. And tonight, for the first time, he felt like he had finally started to repay that debt. Not to her, not really, to himself, to the man he had been before the war broke him, to the man he was slowly becoming again. The story broke 3 days later. Samantha Rivers published a 12,000-word investigation in the Washington Tribune, laying out years of fraud, embezzlement, and intimidation at the highest levels of the Veterans Recovery Foundation. She named names, she provided evidence, and she told the story of a single father in a Virginia diner who had stood up when everyone else looked away. The article went viral within hours, shared millions of times across social media, covered by every major news outlet in the country. By the end of the week, the FBI had opened a formal investigation, and 3 members of Congress had called for hearings. Hunter watched it unfold from the small apartment he was no longer being evicted from. The Tribune had offered to pay for his story, enough money to clear his debts, and then some. But he had refused. What he had done was not for sale. Instead, he asked Samantha to donate whatever she would have paid him to a veterans assistance organization, one of the small ones that actually helped people, that actually made a difference. She agreed without hesitation, and somehow that felt more valuable than any amount of money. The job offers started coming a week after the story broke. Security firms, private investigation agencies, even a few government contractors who saw potential in a man with his skills and his newly prominent profile. Hunter turned them all down. He had spent enough of his life in that world, surrounded by violence and secrets, and men who valued capability over character. What he wanted now was simpler, quieter. A life where he could be present for his daughter, where he could heal the wounds that had never quite closed, where he could finally stop running from the ghosts that had haunted him for so long. He found work at a veterans center on the other side of town, a small non-profit that helped returning soldiers transition back to civilian life. The pay was modest, barely enough to cover rent and groceries, but the work meant something. Every day he sat across from men and women who had seen what he had seen, felt what he had felt, carried burdens that no one else could understand. And every day he helped them find their way forward. One step at a time, using the hard-earned wisdom of his own broken journey. Harper adjusted to the changes with the resilience that only children possessed. She had new sneakers now, purple ones with dragons on the sides, purchased with the first paycheck from his new job. She had a bedroom of her own in the small house they had rented, on a quiet street lined with oak trees. She had a father who came home at the same time every evening, who helped her with homework and read her stories, and never missed a single bedtime. She had stability, finally, the kind she deserved, the kind he had been unable to provide for so long. One evening, about a month after that night at Rosie's diner, Harper asked him to tell her about the war. They were sitting on the porch, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk, the air warm and sweet with the smell of honeysuckle. Hunter hesitated, unsure how to answer, unsure what was appropriate for an 8-year-old to hear. But Harper waited patiently, the same way she always waited, trusting him to find the right words. "War is complicated, sweetheart," he spoke slowly, choosing each word with care. "It is scary and loud, and sometimes very sad. But it is also about protecting people, about standing up for those who cannot stand up for themselves." He looked at her, at the trust in her eyes, at the love that never wavered no matter how badly he failed. "That is what soldiers do. That is what I tried to do, over there and back here. Stand up for people who needed help. Like you did at the diner?" "Yeah, baby. Like I did at the diner." Harper was quiet for a moment, processing this in her own way. Then she leaned against his arm, her head resting on his shoulder. "I want to be like you when I grow up. I want to help people who are scared." Hunter felt tears prick at his eyes again, a sensation he was becoming more familiar with these days. "You can be whatever you want to be, Harper. Doctor, teacher, astronaut, anything. But if you want to help people, that is a pretty good choice. The world always needs more helpers. Will you teach me?" He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the warmth of her small body against his side. "Every day, sweetheart. Every single day." The congressional hearings began 2 months later, broadcast live on every major network. Hunter testified on the 3rd day, wearing his old dress uniform for the first time in years, sitting straight-backed before a panel of senators who listened with expressions ranging from outrage to disbelief. He told them everything: the fraud, the neglect, the veterans who had died, because help that was promised never arrived. He named names without flinching, looked cameras in the eye without blinking, spoke truth to power with the same quiet certainty he had shown in that diner on a rainy Thursday night. When he finished, the committee room erupted in applause. Senators who had spent their careers avoiding veterans' issues suddenly found their voices, demanding accountability, promising reform. It was political theater, Hunter knew, more about appearances than genuine change. But somewhere in the noise, real progress was being made. Laws would change. Oversight would improve. And maybe, just maybe, fewer veterans would fall through the cracks that had nearly swallowed him whole. Samantha Rivers found him afterward, outside the hearing room, surrounded by reporters shouting questions he did not know how to answer. She pulled him aside, away from the cameras, her expression serious but warm. "You did good in there. Really good. I just told the truth. That is exactly what made it good." She studied his face, seeing the exhaustion beneath the composure. "What are you going to do now? You could write a book, do the talk show circuit, become an advocate. People want to hear from you." Hunter shook his head. "I have a daughter waiting for me at home. That is where I need to be." Rivers smiled, understanding in a way that most people could not. "You are a good man, Hunter Blake, a good father. Do not ever let anyone tell you different." He drove home through evening traffic, the radio playing old country songs that reminded him of his own father, of summer nights in rural Virginia, before the army and the war and everything that came after. The road stretched before him, familiar now, leading toward a house with a porch and a yard, and a daughter who thought he was a superhero. He was not sure he deserved that faith, but he was learning, slowly, to accept it, to believe that maybe the broken pieces of himself could still add up to something worthwhile. Harper ran out to meet him when he pulled into the driveway, her purple dragon sneakers flashing in the fading light. She crashed into him like a small missile, arms wrapped around his waist, face pressed against his stomach. "Daddy, you were on TV. I saw you." "You looked so brave." He scooped her up, swinging her in a circle that made her shriek with laughter. "I was just telling the truth, sweetheart, like we always talked about." "The senators looked scared of you," Hunter laughed, setting her down on the porch steps. "Senators are scared of everything, baby. That is why they are senators." They sat together on the porch swing, Harper pressed against his side, watching the last of the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Fireflies began their nightly dance, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked at shadows. It was ordinary, this moment. Unremarkable. The kind of evening that happened in thousands of homes across America, fathers and daughters sharing quiet time before bed. But for Hunter, it was everything. Every battle he had fought, every wound he had suffered. Every night he had spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if tomorrow was worth facing. It had all led here, to this porch, this swing, this child who loved him without conditions or reservations. He was not the same man who had shipped out to Afghanistan all those years ago. He was not even the same man who had walked into Rosie's diner on a rainy Thursday night. He was someone new, forged from the wreckage of who he used to be, still imperfect, still healing, but finally moving forward instead of standing still. "Daddy?" Harper's voice was sleepy now, the excitement of the day finally catching up with her. "Yeah, baby. I'm glad you're my daddy." Hunter pulled her closer, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. "I am glad you are my daughter, Harper. Gladder than you will ever know." The fireflies danced, the stars emerged. And somewhere in Virginia, a broken soldier finally found his way home.